met my daughter. She's our marketing wizard. She does all the good stuff that you see on Facebook and Instagram. She also is an inspector, by the way. So sometimes we have these big, 10,000, 15,000 square foot properties, and we can bring 7 people. She's one of the 7 who's also doing the inspections with us. She also runs the company. All of my guys actually answer to Mackenzie, which is a pretty interesting dynamic when you think that they're all answering to a 26-year-old. So, good thing. So what we're here to talk about today, and Greg and I kind of had a discussion the other day about how we wanted to do this, negotiating the repairs after the inspection, but what are the actual repairs, and what is our role in that transaction? And people sort of confuse us, because I'll have someone come to me and say, is this something I should be asking for? How much is this going to cost? Just so that people understand, that's not what our job as home inspector does. Our job is to identify what they have. They take that information, or we present that information, and then they sit down with you as their representative to discuss what needs to be done and how they go through that process. So there is a lane. We stay in it. Hopefully you guys stay in your lane. I don't want to be a realtor. I hope you guys don't want to be a home inspector. And so as far as repairs and stuff go, I don't get into the real negotiations. We get into discovering what the issue is. We're pretty good about not telling somebody what an issue is without being able to give them a solution. We like to say if there's no such thing as a problem, it's how you emotionally and financially handle the solution. We don't want someone to be presented something and have no idea about how to go about fixing it. We're not going to give them costs. We're not necessarily going to refer contractors to them, but we're going to give them an idea of what the avenue is that they have to go with, and then that's when they sit down and talk with you guys about how to do that. I don't know how specific you want to get on that. I don't know if you guys have questions about certain things on reports, or if there's anything specific about a home inspection that you guys have a question on. Yes, sir.
I have a question not about the report. Can you tell us about what your license requirements are now?
So as of July 1st of last year, Rhode Island home inspectors are now licensed. And there's 2 different levels. There's an associate level, and then there's a full home inspector level. The associate level, they have to go through a certain number of ride-alongs and inspections before they can become an associate. As a licensed home inspector, you have to have done 150 paid inspections and also carry certain levels of insurance which are specified by the state. And there's also CE requirements. Just like you guys have continuing education, we also have continuing education, and ours is every 2 years. The licensing that just occurred in July, there's a lot of home inspectors out there right now, because people were grandfathered in, people were able to get in. I believe in 2 years' time or so, when the renewals come up, that you're going to see those numbers thin out a great deal when people realize that they don't want to pay for the E&O insurance, and they don't want to pay for all the other things that are involved with having to be a home inspector. So I think we're going to be back to sort of our original 30 or 40 kind of established guys, and in that group there's probably 5 or 6 of us who have really been around a long, long time. So one of the things too, I know Mackenzie said that if you get another home inspector's report, we're happy to take a look at it. We're going to look at specific items. I don't critique other home inspectors. That's not my job. Certain people have certain specialties, but we can talk about specific items on there and sort of help you interpret that. But you should be getting a report that breaks things down for you. You shouldn't just be getting a report that says, these are all the issues. You should be getting a report that puts those into perspective. And I'll just use ours as an example. We use different colors, black and blue. We don't use red. Anybody in here past life as a school teacher? Those guys love red, right? Because they love to scare the kids. We don't use red. We use red only if it's sort of a life emergency, like a gas leak, that type of thing. But we use black and blue. And we break things into majors and minors. And to us, major is anything over 500 to fix, contractor type repair, safety issues, or cumulative issues. And that's really how you want to get the reports, because you don't want to have to dive through and dig through every single report and find all that information out. That's kind of where we are. And then that report obviously goes to the realtor, who you guys are. And you guys should be able to decipher most of it. It should be written in a language that's clear, easy, concise, and understandable, and it shouldn't be anything, that we fine our guys if they see something, oh damn, or that kind of stuff. We don't like to have frightening type words and stuff. Everything is presented in a calm type of manner so it can be looked at and rationally deciphered. Okay? Questions on that so far? All right. Now my report goes to him.
I guess. So we're gonna have to go back to 2019 to act like you can actually request things from a home inspection or have a home inspection, because right now it doesn't seem like there are many, as you alluded to earlier. More post-closing inspections than there are transactional inspections. So I think one of the things, we don't have a script, so I'm just gonna be talking out of my memory. One of the things I think that people need to pay attention to in the inspection process is the 10 business days. There's constantly arguments about what day is the 10th day, what's the 12th day. You know, it's good right from the start of the transaction to get on the same sheet of music with the buyer's agent and the selling agent as to what are we considering the 10th business day in this transaction. Whether somebody thinks VJ Day is a holiday or not a holiday. I mean, there's all different things. There are other religious holidays that some people think are a holiday, some people don't. So right up front, you know, when I'm working with a buyer's agent or a listing agent, do you agree that July 10th is the 10th business day? Yes, I agree that July 10th is the 10th business day. Okay, now I have that in writing. So at least if something comes up later, I have an email from them confirming that they think July 10th is the 10th business day. The other misnomer I'm constantly seeing out in the field, and as a listing agent at this stage of my career, I'm doing more listings than buyers, but buyers will be like, well, you know, they'll send me an inspection request on like the 13th or 14th day. And I'll be like, all right, I will present this, but you're past the 10 business days. Well, we did our inspection at day 8. Yes, I know you did your inspection. But the 10 business days is not just for doing the inspections. It's for doing the inspections, making requests, and negotiating them to fruition, and having everyone memorialize everything on a document. Ideally, one of the ones provided by the Realtor Association. Repair addendum, saying that what is agreed or not agreed to. And I would advise using that agreement to finalize, I mean, I think we should be using that agreement to finalize the process, because in that repair addendum, first of all, it states what is being done as a part of the inspections. It also gives you a reinspection window. You know, I've had a lot of situations where all the work, the listing agent sends me something saying that all the inspection items are completed. And then we get our reinspection period, we bring an electrician back, and he's like, Greg, there's not one of these things is done. And so now here we are, we're thankfully we've got this addendum that says that they acknowledge that they completed all the items. I got a licensed electrician saying they didn't do the items. And now, you know, you have time to go back and forth, but if you don't use a repair addendum that memorializes how many days, like do you have 5 days to reinspect, do you have 10 days, do you have 7 days? You know, every item, every line on these documents means something. But the 10 business days is to actually complete the inspections and memorialize the final results of the inspections. Who's fixing what, or what's not getting fixed, or what credit is being issued in lieu of something. You have 10 business days to do that. So,
Yeah. We get calls all the time from people who want an inspection, and they're, you know, 5 days, they're already 5 days into their period, and they want us to be able to do the inspection the next day. In a lot of cases, it's unrealistic, especially right now. This is the, you know, the heat of the market. We have certain things, radon, that takes 48 hours. You know, once that's in place, you don't get the results for 48 hours. If you're doing well and you're doing water testing, it's 5 to 7 days to get your results back. Mold testing is 72 hours minimum usually to get your testing back. We tell people when we book the inspection that it's going to take this long to get those things back, and that they need to check with their realtor to make sure that if the results are coming outside of that inspection, that they're still going to be honored, or that you get an extension on it. Well, if anybody's doing country homes and has well, understand that we sometimes can't book a well inspection for 7 or 8 days from when they call us. There's really, in my mind, there's 2 guys who do it the right way, we use, and they're always booked up. So, you know, it's unrealistic for someone to call and think that we're going to get everything done the next day. The expectation that's been set with them is they've just been told that you have to get this done within 10 days. A lot of times buyers need more information than that. They have to understand the process.
So when you sign a purchase and sales agreement with a buyer or a seller, make your life simple. Go into your calendar, whether it's physical or digital, and put the 10th business day in your calendar at 8 or 9 a.m. so that you have that day to either finalize everything or get an extension put in writing. Even if they're not going to grant it, at least you've requested it to protect your buyer's deposit if you end up having to get out of the agreement. With regards to making requests from inspections, every buyer obviously has a different temperament about how they to have the highest rate of success of negotiating items in your buyer's favor, pick the items that are deemed to be the most serious or health and safety issues, as opposed to, you know, if I get you know, as a listing agent, again, many times I'll get an inspection request item with 50 items on it. As soon as you put that in front of the seller, it's just send me a release. 9 times out of 10, you put 30, 20, 30 items of request in front of them, they're not even gonna look at it. They're just gonna say, send me a release. Whereas if you sit with the buyer and spend time with them and go through all of the items that they're concerned about, you make some calls to electricians and plumbers or carpenters and start getting real numbers on these items, and they realize that this one's $75, this one's $80, this one's $5,000, this one's $7,000, and you can eliminate the $75 items and focus on the $500,000, $7,000 items, and do, you know, 5 or 10 serious items as opposed to 20 or 30, you know, picky items. I think you have a much better chance of negotiating a favorable outcome for your client, because once the seller kind of closes the door and says, I'm not negotiating, you're usually not going to get them back. You know, once you've alienated them or they feel like you're not the person they want to sell their house to because you don't understand owning a house, or they can come up with a million reasons in their mind why they don't want to do business with you. So if you can try to focus on the items that you and the buyer both agree are the most serious and the ones that I say to them, look, there's 30 items you want done. What are the 10 items that you would not buy this house unless they're done? Okay, those are the 10 items you wouldn't buy the house. If those 10 items aren't done, okay, then let's give them those 10 items. And if they won't sell you the house because they won't fix those items, you've made that choice versus alienating them and never even getting a chance to reach an agreement. That's certainly something I think is something that's worked in my favor over the years, is being able to help the buyer get through all the noise and get down to the serious items. Ask questions so I can think.
If you've given the report to the seller and you've given them a list of 20 or 10 items, and they say, well, that's it, I'm out, I don't want to deal with this, don't they really have an obligation to disclose those inadequacies?
Now, that's a gray area, because a home inspector is not an electrician, they're not a plumber, they're not a carpenter. They have general knowledge about a lot of things, but I've had many situations where a homeowner brings in a licensed HVAC professional. I had one a few weeks ago where they said the furnace was absolutely shot and that it was a health and safety hazard. The owner brought in a reputable Rhode Island HVAC company, and the HVAC technician said, this furnace is not even though it's old, it is nowhere near shot. So was I supposed to disclose that the furnace was shot? So I don't know. I'd be careful with that. You know, I would be careful with telling a seller what they do or don't need to disclose, because it's not our job to fill out the disclosures. Now, if I've provided them with the home inspection report and it says the attic is filled with mold, and I can see the mold, then yes, I'm thinking at that point in time they should get a person out there who's qualified to evaluate the situation and either come up with a remediation plan or make a representation about it. But every light switch that's broken, or you know, things that are said to be not functioning correctly, without a licensed and insured professional who's got a license in that exact trade, I don't know. I would be careful with that. That's my opinion. That's an opinion, obviously.
I agree. It seems remarkable that a property goes pending and 8 days later, 12 days later, goes back on the market and the disclosures haven't changed a bit.
Right.
Seems a bit disingenuous.
I will say that in the last 3 or 4 years that the 10 business day rule has been often used as a get out of jail free card because I found a different house that I want.
Agreed.
So, you know, you don't, it's hard to know what really transpired. Now, if you really want to know, I tell my agents, look at who the last pending agent was and call them and ask them what happened. If you want to get the straight answer, we found out last year there was an undisclosed fire with a house and all sorts of stuff that we were never told. And it was never updated in the disclosure. We got our buyer's deposit back and their inspection money back because the last buyer's agent gave us the whole story. So it's like an ex-girlfriend or an ex-wife or ex-husband. You want to find out what's wrong with the person? Call them up. You know, if you want to know if the neighborhood's nice, go knock on the neighbor's doors and ask them if they like living there. They're like, no, we've had 5 break-ins in the last week. Oh, that's why your house is thrown on the market. I mean, I'm just saying, talk to somebody who doesn't have an interest in the situation. The former buyer's agent doesn't have any money left in the deal. They obviously wanted to sell the house. Most buyer's agents aren't just exiting deals for the sake of showing a buyer another 20 houses. So obviously there was a reason why they exited the contract. So, you know, you go to the X.
You say that, one of the most interesting things for us is when we pull up to a house and the neighbor comes up and says, oh, you guys doing a home inspection? And you'd be surprised how much information the neighbor wants to tell us about that house. All the time.
The best is when the second inspection is the same inspector as the first time. The inspector goes, I'm just here a week ago. I'm like, oh, really? And we just had this a few months ago in North Kingstown. The inspector's like, I was just here 3 weeks ago. And the buyer's agent was like, at my office is like, really? She's like, well, what came up? He's like, well, these are the things I saw the last time. I don't know if they've done anything with them. And to your point, the disclosures weren't updated, and there was a bunch of structural concerns. Not only did they not disclose any of them, they also had a structural engineer come in and documented the information and never disclosed that either. Wow. So because we called the same structural engineer, the inspector told him to call last time, and he's like, I just went there. I gave him a full structural report on what the things that need to be done, the columns that need to be added, and they didn't disclose any of it.
In my opinion, we also have a duty to disclose things that we know.
That we know, absolutely.
So that situation probably should have been handled a little bit differently.
Without question. But the problem is that we have no right to touch that disclosure form.
Absolutely.
We have an obligation
We can give
to
the listing
disclose knowledge of deficient conditions. Like if 3 guys come over, 3 people come over and tell you there's mold in the attic, and the buyer says to you, hey, is there, any mold? And you say, no, there's no mold here. I mean, I see it all the time, every day. You do have an obligation to say there have been a couple opinions that there's mold in the attic. Obviously, you're entitled to your own inspection. But it's tricky when you start answering definitive information about things that we don't have a license in.
Agreed.
I'm a licensed mold remediation person, but I don't go over people's houses and start telling them about mold, even though I can identify it, and I know what the action plan is. I tell them to call someone who's licensed and insured to have them come look at it. Now, if I see it on a pre-listing appointment, and I see their attic is filled with mold, I'll say, it looks as though you have fungal growth in your attic. Here's 3 companies you can call to have a better opinion or assessment of it. Because the problem, when you as a realtor with more knowledge than most homeowners, you go in a house, like I see leaks on ceilings, I see things that the homeowners don't even see because they live there, they're just walking through the house every day to the same place. I see water stains, I see all sorts of things, and like, we didn't even know that was there. The problem is, by getting to the inspection and then having it come up in the inspection, now the buyer can get scared, their anxiety is already high, and now the attic is filled with mold. If I see it at the listing appointment, I recommend that they call licensed and insured companies and put together an action plan or cure it prior to listing it. Because you get to the inspection and now the attic's filled with mold, the parents are there, and the dad's there, and everybody's got an opinion about it, and now the buyer's scared straight. Versus if single source or whoever comes out there remediates everything, receipts, warranties, you attach that to the disclosures, they know that it's been treated. And if they don't want to buy it because there may have been mold at one point in time in the house, okay, they don't want to buy it. But you're a lot better coming at people with a problem and a solution versus just a problem, in my past experience.
A lot of that also gets eliminated, as a marketing thing, but by pre-listing inspections. You have us go in before a sale. Now we find that information. Your buyer doesn't have that same stress level of that 10-day period getting all that information. They have time to find their own contractors, get the work done, and then get into the transaction in a much better position.
Pre-listing inspections create one problem for me as a listing agent. So now, I have a pre-listing inspection. Your name, I'm sorry.
Bill.
Bill, I apologize. To Bill's point, now I have a report in my hands, and it lists a bunch of things with the property. Now, am I filling out a 100-page disclosure form because I had an inspection on the property, or am I attaching the pre-listing inspection, but it's an opinion of one person, and now a different inspector, like I've had situations where the seller has had a pre-listing inspection, and 2 weeks later, the buyer has a home inspection, fine, $10,000 worth of termite damage, it didn't come up in the pre-listing inspection. Now the seller is mad as hell that they paid for an inspection. At first they're refuting the termite damage until the carpenter comes out and finds 20 foot of sill damage, and now it's a pissing contest. So I have mixed emotions about a pre-listing inspection, personally. But I get your point. In a perfect world of real information and transparency and honesty, a pre-listing inspection would be great. But the problem is we're dealing with real people, we're dealing with mistakes, we're dealing with opinions, and I've seen two people come in and say different things. That's why we changed the inspection rule. It used to say that it had to be, materially deficient conditions or something to that effect. And what would happen is you would have an inspection and they would say the electrical panel needs to be replaced. I would bring in ABC Electric and they would say it needs 2 new breakers, the panel's fine. And now we've got an argument between the parties. Well, I want $2,000 for a new panel. Well, I'll give you $200 for the 2 breakers that need to be replaced. And it was a war. So we went to this more liberal, terminate within 10 days if you're not happy with the inspection, so that we wouldn't have the war anymore because people weren't getting deposits back and everything else. So it's so tricky because you're dealing with people and emotions and money and time and parents and uncles who are builders who come in and the uncle knows what the home inspector, where did you get this guy from? You see it. I mean, you must see dad come and follow
Every day.
Right, every day. The aunt who's built 7 houses, comes in and follows you around, tells you missed a joist hanger on the deck or something.
So if you do go and they do provide information, they say, well, we have the radon, excuse me, we have the radon test, we already did it, we'll be more than happy to show it to you. We had the inspection so that you don't have to do the inspection.
Yeah, don't even think about saying so you don't have to do the inspection.
Well, that's what was told to me
Right.
a couple days ago.
I'm saying don't ever say
Yeah,
that.
no, exactly, that was my point, like, I would still want, to your point, that people are going to see different things based on what their priorities are. But the radon always seems to be a little bit, that one scares people.
Scares
think,
people,
when
I agree.
the test comes back. I have one that was like 4.4 and she's ready to mediate the whole neighborhood. How old is that test? If someone says I have it and it's a year old, I mean.
It can change by the week because of barometric pressure.
Yeah,
I've had the same house test differently in 2 weeks.
Okay.
You can have a different reading 365 days a year in radon. Depends on outside
The
conditions.
only real
I mean,
accurate
if you
test
look
for a
at the
radon test is a long-term test.
That's what they do in schools.
Right. A long-term test is what should be done with radon, because you catch a storm in 48 hours and your level spikes. Unfortunately, the only real test is a long-term test, but no one has time for that.
When you talk about the inspection report, understand that inspection report too, even though they say we may have an inspection report, that belongs to whoever hired us in the first place. We don't have a contractual obligation with anybody beyond that person in the first contract.
And on top of that, different inspectors notice different things.
Right.
So you're gonna
Different
have 2
specialties.
different reports that have different specialties, which causes another whole
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
And I think in this market where things are just so crazy that, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but if they have something that comes out pending, they're not disclosing it because they know they have 50 other buyers that are willing to pay overpriced and ignore it. And it's like crazy.
That's where I personally think the disclosure should be eliminated. I believe that homeowners' disclosure should not even exist, because I've never seen one that's filled out accurately. So I don't think they're worth the paper they're written on. That's my opinion. Because people lie.
Either are prequels, but that's
Right.
another.
That's a problem also, and that's a real problem.
And I think radon is, EPA says 1 year to retest. Like, if you have a reading and then nobody did anything with it and say it was 4.2, and I think they say retest it.
A year later, then.
I say retest anyways because I have a radon system and my fan went and it slowly went. So the levels started going. So even as a homeowner, I'm having it tested every couple of years just to make sure that I can see if the levels are changing, but if there's like a dramatic difference.
You also know on the loan documents, the federal loan documents, there's a EPA statement on there that talks about radon, and they recommend testing for radon every 2 years.
2 years?
Every 2 years,
It's 2 years.
especially in a real estate transaction. And so when people call us up and ask if they should do radon, we always recommend it, and we use the EPA as our backing for that.
It's
And
an
don't,
expensive insurance policy.
and don't not test the house with a mitigation system. I've had more
Always.
houses with
Always.
mitigation systems come back with elevated radon. Most people think that looking glass that Rob was referring to, which is the pressure, the amount of pressure, right?
Called a
Suction.
manometer.
Manometer. It indicates the.
Fan pressure.
Fan pressure.
So some people, I'm going to people's houses, homeowners, and they'll be like, oh, our radon's low. Look at our manometer is like this. That is just an indicator of how much pressure you're able to generate,
How
right?
much the fan's pulling out, the constant pressure is drawing from it's pulling the air from underneath the
CFMs
slab.
or- yeah.
Yep. And you'll have different fans, different sizes, depending on the size of the basement. If you you ever do condos are such a sticky wicket with radon too, because if we find radon, who actually is doing the mediation? Is it the unit owner? Because now they're not only remediating theirs, but they're remediating who's on either side of them. Is it the condo association? Is it that particular building? It's kind of a mess. So when people ask us to do radon on condos, we do it, but we also explain that this may be something that doesn't actually get addressed even if it comes back high.
In condos and new construction, people say, I don't need to do an inspection because it's a condo, or I don't need to do an inspection because it's new construction. Every house at one time was constructed, and if 20 years, you have a 20-year-old house that's got problems, it probably had problems the day it was built.
The craziest thing with new construction is when someone says, and I'm just throwing out a name, I don't know if there's a builder by this name, Billy Smith built this house. Billy Smith never touched any part of that house. He had all these different subs and contractors who came in and touched the house. He may have a great reputation, but his reputation is only as good as the work that all of his subs did. So if people are shying away from, we're actually much more, and I don't want to say, it's going to sound, we're much more thorough on a brand new house than on a lived-in house. Because everything on a brand new house should work and should be perfect because it's brand new. So we tend to be a lot more stringent on those than we do on a house that's
I had a
lived
brand new
in.
house 2 years ago in Coventry. The buyer had a home inspection. The high efficiency gas-fired forced-hot air furnace vent pipe was only about 12 inches off the ground, and the home inspector said to the builder, he said, "What if it snows?"
Yeah.
The guy didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
These people are going to end up with a carbon monoxide issue if it snows, or the furnace is going to shut down. It's going to be frozen in their house.
And things like that happen because, the sequence of building stuff is that flue may have been out through the foundation, but then they came in and put a foot of backfill in. And so they changed all of that. So all of those things are things that need to be looked at. And it's, we teach our guys that when you step in the front door and go out the back door, not even thinking about it, you're going to see about 1,500 different items. It's probably even more than that. But we see the things that are out of the ordinary, not the ordinary. That's our job, is not to look at the ordinary.
So Greg, in that situation, new construction, you have an inspection and there are deficiencies. How do you, as the buyer's agent, deal with that contract prior to, them taking ownership of the home? What do you do? What do you do? How do you address those deficiencies with new construction, with your buyer?
With new construction? I mean, just like I would on a regular sale, I would put in writing the items that were found to be deficient, and make the request that the builder rectify them prior to closing. The only benefit you have with new construction versus resale is, I think, the Rhode Island Builders Association requires the builders to stand behind their product for a year. 1 year. So you do have a year to kind of chase after them, but good luck chasing, unless they've got 20 more houses to finish, and they don't want you as the poster child standing in the front of the neighborhood saying this builder sucks. If you're the last house, get to them before you close. If you got 20 more houses, well, you can stand out with the poster and get them to come back.
So Greg, with that one you just mentioned in Coventry, would that affect them getting a CO?
They got the CO.
Oh, geez.
Don't depend on town inspectors to actually see.
If it's snowing or raining, the town inspector comes over, they're in and out in 7 minutes.
Yeah.
I always tell people, have a smoke inspection on a complicated house during a snowstorm or during heavy rain or something, because they're just getting in and getting out.
They just seeded the yard. It's all, the first step he takes, he goes that far in the mud. You think he goes around the side of the house? No.
And the other thing is, and now this sounds foolish, but if you're a listing agent and the seller's like, what should we do for preparing the house for the home inspection? I say, clean it like you were cleaning it for the showings or for the pictures. Like, make it look beautiful. For whatever reason, whether it's an appraiser, a home inspector, doesn't matter who it is. First of all, the buyers are probably coming back, and they're probably bringing half their family and half their old neighborhood with them. But things that are pretty and shine tend to make it a little more smoothly through a process than things that are dirty and nasty.
We're a lot less pissed off if we come out clean and we haven't had to move half of their belongings to get access to stuff.
Make the attic access accessible. You don't want the home inspector and the realtor having to move all their fur coats and half their possessions out of the closet. Every week I'm doing that. I'm moving clothes out of a closet so the inspector can get in the attic.
It sounds foolish, but you talk about taking stuff out of the closet, but who knows, maybe they had some special picture in between those two furs and you took it off and it fell down. We don't want to have that responsibility of touching people's belongings.
Or cash, that one inspector, Dave Brzezinski, a few years ago, found like 10 grand sitting in a closet.
I found 16 and 11, so
Right.
we found it over the years, but, you know, and especially if you think back the past year with the pandemic, nobody wanted us touching anything, right? So we would actually send out stuff that said, if you want, you know, to inspect the kitchen, this is right in the beginning, calm down, but open all your cabinet doors, open all your drawers, have everything open for us so that we don't have to touch any of your stuff. You know, it depends on the seller. Some don't want you touching anything, some will completely prepare for you, some won't do anything. The people who generally don't do anything for you are tenants, right? They're the worst ones. They don't even stop doing what they're doing. I can tell you some pretty interesting stories, but you know, all that stuff is in the preparation. The more that we can go in and actually do our inspection, the better our inspection report's going to be, the more information
Have
buyers
you
have.
had tenants smoking crack during the inspection? I did about 3 weeks ago in East Greenwich.
I haven't had, no, not smoking crack, but they've been doing ungodly acts. That's
Right.
okay.
It was smoking crack on the second floor. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Once all is done and said, and you close, and things start to fall apart later, that will not discuss in the inspection, is there any recourses for the new,
I'll get a
owner?
few different answers. So one answer is, I found over the years, the best closing gift you can give to a buyer is a 1-year home warranty on all the major mechanicals. That is the best closing gift you can give. Now, I understand that it's not affordable in some situations, but a 1-year home warranty is probably the best closing gift you can give to any buyer in the event you can work it out with you and your broker or whomever. So the statute of frauds, there is no limit, meaning in the event that a seller purposely lied about the fact that they get water in the basement or that they have bats living in their attic that no one was able to figure out. So the statute of frauds is unlimited. The problem with that is pursuing actions against a seller or anyone in this world is expensive. You're looking between $300 and $600 an hour to talk to someone who really knows what they're doing legally. So if it's a $2,000 problem, you're going to burn through the $2,000 before you even get anywhere. Now, you know, a basic lawyer's letter you can probably get done for a few $100s to warn the seller that has worked successfully for me over the years. I get a competent attorney to do a letter basically stating that the following items were found to, you know, be potentially known by the seller and not disclosed, and may warrant legal actions. And all of a sudden the seller writes a check for money to the buyer. So it just depends on the seller, depends on the buyer, depends on the listing agent. Some listing agents don't even call you back after the closing, they won't even listen to you. So the short answer is, of course, there's legal actions can be taken against anybody at any point in time for lying, but the statute of frauds doesn't have limitations on it.
No, I'm not suggesting they're lying.
But if
Yeah.
you miss something, I mean, it didn't get observed during the inspection, I suppose that's why we have E&O and he has E&O.
We have warranties. Also understand that we note in our reports when we have limitations. There's areas that we can't access because there are times that there's things that we just can't see. A lot of our inspection reporting is defensive reporting because there's things that we have to put in there. If I don't have access to an electric panel because of the 92 boxes of storage in there, we note that fact. And whether they want to clear it and have us come back and take a look at it, we're not clearing it along. So there are certainly some limitations.
Snow in the winter.
Snow in the winter. The other limitation that we have, which is a huge one that no one ever really takes into consideration, is that in 2 hours' time, we are inspected to dissect something that we have never been in, never seen, never operated, and to be able to give a complete, concise picture of that to a buyer. It's an impossible task that we do very well, but it's also not perfect. So we do the best we can in the limited amount of resources that we have in being able to do that inspection. We think we do a good job. I think most of the guys around here do a pretty good job, but there are certainly things that do happen. Home ownership is, we always talk, home ownership is 52 weeks of project. You don't maintain something that's going to break.
Mold, unless it's visible, like let's say it's underneath the basement carpet in a finished basement, are you able to tell that with a gauge
Air
of some
test?
sort?
Yeah, you can do that with an air test.
You can,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
I wondered.
So you guys all understand mold's an expensive proposition to test for because of the lab testing. And the problem with mold, and Greg can tell you this too, is that there's no standard for mold. You know, all of us can be in the same room with the same mold, and everybody have a completely different reaction or no reaction. So when we do our testing, everyone always asks us, why do we do a sample outside? Well, the outside test is the standard. That's the test, that's the mold that we live with on a daily basis. Whatever molds we test on the inside are compared to the outside, and that's when we know if we have elevated levels or not. And again, that's also another thing that's subjective in a way like radon, because depending on weather conditions, depending on how the house is built, depending on what materials are in the house, those numbers can change.
And would a general inspection identify potential rodent infestation? Not bugs, but rodent?
We do.
You do, okay.
I don't know about others.
Okay.
The problem with rodents is oftentimes, especially in the attic, they're under the insulation. And when you go to do your first project on your house and you pull back all the insulation and then it rains feces on you, you realize that you have a rodent problem.
So that wouldn't necessarily
But
be
if
visible.
he's, you're up in an attic crawling with 30 inches of insulation.
If
And
we
it's
see rodent
122
droppings, if we see
degrees up
rodent
there.
holes and that stuff, we do know.
Okay.
But no, we don't note it as a major item, unless they're up there with me, then it's a major item. But otherwise, I don't know, I don't know when they've been there. And the thing is, any kind of bug road, we have a little saying that we always tell people, the rodents don't move into your house, you just moved into theirs. They're gonna be here a lot longer than we are. They were here before we got here. You have to prepare your house and do things that make it so it's not a place for them to live happily.
Well, and I had a situation where those two things both came up after the buyer moved in, neither came up in the inspection. And so I didn't really know how to guide him as to what he could do.
Right, there's also, again, we're back to the limitations, because a lot of times where do rodents show up? They show up in sheds, garages, and basements.
Yeah.
And where do people put all their storage? Sheds, garages, and basements, So we may not, or me or whoever else, we might not have been able to get into those particular areas to see where the rodents are.
They can come at any time.
They can come in anywhere. They need about a fingernail size opening, all right? If you're looking for them, by the way. If you see piles of droppings, that's typically where they're going in and out, because they have collapsible skeletal systems, and as they put their head into an opening, they have to bring their body through, and that natural action.
These people are trying to eat.
Who wants a pizza? That's where you typically find them. And we can go around any house, and I could probably find you 10 or 15 openings the size of my fingernail.
Well, this one popped out of the oven when my client's mother-in-law opened the oven.
They love
and it
making
was-
nests in ovens.
And it was an expensive house in East Greenwich on a lake.
They like
so
all
It
houses.
wasn't a
They
cheap
like
house.
all
it was
houses.
an
They don't care.
expensive
Yeah, that doesn't make it.
They like all houses.
So
Rodents don't
naturally, I
discriminate.
felt terrible.
They'll go anywhere.
What do you do?
Right.
They love ovens. Oh, God.
Gross.
And cars.
Ovens, I mean, cars, oh, yes.
They like cars, too.
Well, they can feel heat from 100 yards away.
Yep.
So they can come out of the woods and get into it.
My friends, all the
Big
wives
guy.
and there's cars.
He's gotta go the big long way.
You can.
Yeah, I had another question. The seller's disclosure, as long as they fill it out based on when they've owned the house. I was in a basement, it was so perfectly clean, I questioned it, and he said, oh, not since I've owned the house. And only to find out from the neighbor, that when the house flooded and water was shooting out of the basement, did the seller sell it to this guy who flipped it and cleaned it up? So they're not, he knows that, because he bought the house, but he doesn't have to tell me that?
So the flipper sold it to you, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
But the prior owner had a flood,
Yeah.
and the flipper then sold it to you.
He says, I don't know anything about water.
The flipper didn't have the water.
All right, just
So
checking.
it's tricky. That's why I say these disclosures, I don't think they're even worth the
Yeah.
paper they're written on. But, I also would say that the right way to have a home inspection is to hire a carpenter, electrician, a plumber, a mold guy, a pool guy, a septic guy, and you'd be there for 3 weeks and it would cost $4,000. But that's the right way to have an inspection. I mean, if you wanna know single thing wrong with your house.
Always go through the MLS, look at the old listings. and
Call the
look
last
at-
listing
Yeah,
agent.
no, I did. And then you mentioned wells that you do you subcontract that? So if someone calls you, you contact a well, it's just the timing, sometimes you can't control.
Right, they're,
Okay.
those guys do 3 a day,
Right,
and there's 2 guys, now, when I say do it the right way, there's people who come out and do the bucket test, they'll do the 5-gallon, how fast is the 5-gallon, but we don't do that, we do a 2-hour water test. We open up the wellhead, we put a monitor down in there, and we run that water for 2 hours. So it's expensive, you know, wells are, you buy a country house, you're gonna pay $600, $700 to have that well tested if you're doing the flow test and the water
Yeah,
test.
country house, you're up to almost $2,000 on a good inspection now.
Right, because you got your septic.
People
you
get
got all sorts of-
horrified by it, but you have to say to them, look, you're buying a $300,000 house, 1% of the size of the transaction is not even the inspection, you know, you're less than 1%.
Well, we tried, you know, for a while there, we had a thing going, we were talking about, you know, when you get a mortgage, you have a 30-year mortgage, right? You have all these different payments. If you're not willing to pay one mortgage payment towards a home inspection, then you're not really willing to make that investment. Our fee is very small. You know, it's minimal when you consider the amount of stuff that we can actually find or save money on for people. And it's not just about finding issues. It's also about teaching people about their house. People don't know how to operate these things. You know, they have no idea. Last year, during this whole thing, and we would have people, in a single day, we do, you know, 2 houses, both 3,500 square feet. One 1.5 million, one 3.5 million. Both buyers would be coming from New York, live in 900 square foot apartments. They don't own furniture, they don't own a car, they're not gonna pay any more for their mortgage than they were for the apartment in New York City. But they have no idea how to operate these monstrosities they want. It's crazy. And by the way, they're selling them now too and going back to New York.
Right.
That's a whole nother story.
What about appliances, Hank? Do you still do appliances?
We test appliances, and we also run them through, we have a recall check that we run everything through the Consumer Product Safety Commission. So we know if anything's ever had recalls. We do that for mechanical equipment and appliances. It says right on our report that appliances are not tested. And that's basically because they're not really part of a real estate transaction. But we still look at them because we want to know that they operate safely. We don't want somebody going in and, you know, having their kid jump up on the stove door to climb to the cabinets and have the stove turn over on them. So we do that, we test them.
And your company's cool with calling as soon as you know the contract's signed, and you can call, you can't come for 5 days, but we can call the Radon and get them in there early, and you don't mind if we do.
It's not that I don't mind, but I don't know who you guys use for radon. Everybody uses Coughlin. Nate's a great guy, and we'd love to be able to get him in the next day, but he's not always the easiest guy to get to do stuff. So, you know, we do 800 radons with him a year. It's only him and Nick, so their schedule's pretty limited. You ever look at his logbook? His logbook is crazy. I don't know how he keeps track of it.
Who do you recommend for the water testing, well water?
So we use 2 guys. We use Rick Lawless and Joe Miano.
Joe's good.
Yeah. Joe's very good, so is Rick. I mean, he's a mad scientist kind of guy, does a great job too. So, but they're
I
hard
use
to get.
Joe and Hoxie, I use Hoxie well. Asa Hoxie's awesome. But Joe's excellent, I've been using Joe for 24 years.
Thank you.
How can that be when you look 20?
You don't know who Joe is. Joe is Joe Blue Eyes.
Joe Blue Eyes. Joe Blue Eyes. Yep. Joe Blue Eyes.
If a house had a septic tank and now is hooked up to city, is there a town or state law, what happens to that tank? Are they responsible to do anything with that? We
In
were
theory,
the
it's supposed to
inspection.
be filled.
Is that, all right, because the inspector just found it filled with water, like, but not waste, but because he could see to the bottom of the tank. But I wasn't sure, is that?
They make them fill the cesspools, so they definitely make them fill the cesspools, but I haven't had the time to make them fill it.
Yeah, the concrete block, they figure the concrete block tanks can hold up under their own. They don't have to worry about the collapse. They do that for cesspools, because cesspools over time will collapse.
Okay.
So, I don't know if you guys are, if anybody in here is doing it too, but, you know, one of the newer things around here is sewer scopes and being able to scope your lines out. We have a lot of older houses, older piping. You know, we run water when we're in a house. Home inspectors run water, they flush toilets, they do all that sort of stuff. But it's not under the same conditions as if someone was living in a house full time. And it's one of those things it's not on a disclosure. It's not covered by anything really. We just can't see sewer lines. So having sewer scopes, it's relatively inexpensive, but they'll typically take a scope and run from the house out to the street connection. And typically, or to the first cleanout, you have to have a cleanout every 100 feet. They can also run them out to septic systems, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what you have in those lines as far as, you know, root penetration, offset pipes, collapsed pipes, types of piping, backflow preventers, all that sort of stuff can be done with sewer scopes.
Question questions that we can try to create a conversation out of?
Thank you for making this fun. If you follow a
Okay with the
script,
list.
it's not fun.
Yeah, no script.
Solar panels
Yes,
on the roof.
yes.
Um,
Issues?
yeah.
So the biggest issue with solar panels actually is not the solar panels, it's the roof itself. If you have to go and have a new roof put on, and you want to have your solar panels removed or replaced, good luck finding the company. Because I don't know of any well, there may be a couple, but I don't know of any solar companies that were around 10 years ago putting them on roofs that are still around. So where you think you might have a warranty or a service agreement or something, I don't know who it's with. And so that becomes a big issue if you have to do any kind of repairs to your roof or replacements of your roof.
The other issue is you have to make sure if they own them, they could be leased as well. So
Yeah, we're not seeing that as much anymore because there was a big stink made of that about 5 or 10 years ago. And so now they're being bought outright or they're external leasing companies. So,
Yeah, that's a problem with the financing. So if there's a note on the panels remaining, and you are transferring your panels obviously to the new buyer, and the payment is, got 10 years left on it at $300 a month, that's going to have to get factored into their debt-to-income ratios in order to inherit those panels from you. So that can be an issue, without question.
and we can't see a lot of times where the panels were installed, what roof conditions are. It just doesn't happen. And people also don't understand, there's maintenance with those. You gotta get up and clean them every once in a while. They get a lot of debris on them. Yeah, we see some, we're pretty good at being able to, explain to people how they work, the systems that they run through, how they're tied into your electrical. The other thing with that too is that people need to understand who actually owns the power that those solar panels are producing, because sometimes it's the homeowner has the panel on the roof, and it's not actually their power. The company that put the panels on is collecting all those credits, however those credits work. I don't get into that stuff, but there's a lot of factors involved with solar stuff.
And can you tell us the life of, I always hear different things for roofs, for hot water tanks, for furnaces, different years depending upon who's calling it. So isn't a roof about 25 years?
Depends on the material.
Okay.
Depends on the material. If you're looking at 3-tab shingles, you're lucky if you get 25 years. If you're looking at architectural shingles, they're 25 to 50 years,
Okay.
depending on the shingle.
Okay.
And then you've got rubber roofs, you've got
But as
clay.
a layman, can we figure that, or, and someone said to me, if you have leftover shingles, I could read the back and tell you, but as an inspector, can you look at the shingle and tell what kind it is?
I can't generally tell what kind it is, but we can
Okay.
give you a good assessment of the age, because
Okay.
it shows different things. But I mean, you could have if you have a house that's out in the middle of nowhere with no trees, the roof is gonna last longer than a house that's in a place with trees. It depends on conditions too.
What about hot water tanks?
Typically, I mean, they say 10 to 12 years, but it depends. Is it oil, is it gas, is it electric? Again, but there's signs on those too that tell you whether or not they're going. If people have the water ratcheted up to very hot, it probably tells you it hasn't been producing hot water for a while, so they're trying to overcompensate. If you see stains on it, if the pressure relief pipe is gone, there's probably 15 different things on a water heater that can indicate age.
Okay.
Same thing with furnaces and boilers. But, as a homeowner,
it's also how it's maintained.
right, maintained, and as a homeowner, I mean, do you go down every 6 months and look at your water heater? No, I got a water heater, it's producing hot water, I'm not gonna do anything with it unless there's an issue. So, it's one of the same thing with your car, you don't worry about what's underneath your engine because the car's running until there's a problem with something that's underneath the hood.
What about hard water? Is that any kind of, can you tell if the house has hard water, soft water, and if that's an issue?
You can sometimes tell water by corrosion on pipes, different types of corrosion on pipes.
Yeah, 'cause I just, from experience, I have some friends that they bought a house and every single appliance that dealt with water was like dead within 5 years.
Are they on a well?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, wells present their own issues with water, because that water, when you get water from your municipality, it's all treated. There's lots of, you wouldn't want to really know what you would actually drink. But yeah, well water has lots of different minerals in it and stuff, and then you have other places too, depending on, when you're talking about heating systems and that sort of stuff, we talk about these hydro air systems now, and the hydro air systems may have 2 units you might have a system up in the attic, and they put antifreeze in those lines. Well, that presents a whole nother issue, because that certainly eats up your pipes, and if that leaks, what kind of damage does it do to your house? Great systems, very efficient systems, but they present their own problems.
Is that something you would note on an inspection? Is that a deficiency?
We noted in the, I wouldn't necessarily know that it's hard water, but we would note the corrosion on the pipes, we would note that, particular pieces of equipment aren't operating properly. So,
Well, the well water quality test
Would
is
tell
gonna
them.
come back with certain things being way out, right? Iron or things like that.
when they do the water testing, the Rhode Island screen covers about 30 or 40 different items, leads, nitrates, bacterias, all that kind of stuff. But it'll tell you the metals and things that are in there, and those are the things that affect your pipes. But almost everything that's in that water, it can be treated, but that's another expense. That's a water treatment. And we don't test water treatment systems, the well guys do all that. Then there's radon in the water, which is a whole other.
How about heating systems? Is there superior heating to someone I had didn't want electric heat? Is that considered dangerous?
It depends. I mean, if you have a little cabin in Narragansett that you don't want to run gas or oil to, electric heat's a great option. If you're running a big 3,500 square foot house, electric heat's probably not the option. It kind of depends on where it is. So you may have a room in that house that wasn't heated, and they put electric heater in there. It serves its purpose. Some people don't like baseboard, but they like radiators. Or some people don't like forced air because it dries out your air. It's just, it's preference. Anybody else? Is that your whole list?
I have another one. Mini split, I was trying to balance it a little. Mini splits, now that, you
Very
don't
popular.
have the one unit, you've got units all over the house.
Yep.
Are you checking
Yes.
okay.
Not only are we checking those, but we're also showing buyers where filters are. Because
Right.
people don't realize the fronts of those things open up and you have filtering on them. And remotes, okay? We take pictures of the remotes, because what happens with those things when people move,
Yeah, right.
right? So, we have a stupid little comment that says obtain remotes to split units and stuff. We do test them. We test the heat side, we test the AC sides.
One problem with inspections in the winter, if you have central air conditioning, is they can't test it, which kind of goes back to my point earlier about the best gift you can give a buyer as an agent is a home warranty, or whatever, however you come up with a way of purchasing it, but they can't test the air conditioning equipment in the dead of winter. I think it has to be 60, 62 degrees or something like that.
65 degrees or under. Now, there is a way to test it. We don't do it because it freaks everybody out. But we're never, and even if you did test it in the wintertime, you're never going to achieve the cold that you want to get. So there's a way to test the condensers if they work. You wrap them in a tarp and you just run them for a couple of minutes to make sure that they do come on. But we don't even do that in the winter. It just freaks people out. So it's an exclusion in the wintertime. Same thing as he was saying before about roofs. If there's snow on the roof, it's an unsafe condition for us to go up there. And sometimes there's so much snow that it's an unsafe condition to even have a place to put your ladder.
And pools can be inspected in the winter. Now, obviously, they can't inspect every single aspect of them, but they can pressure test the underground lines to make sure there's no major breaches underground. They can dive the pool and take a good look. I know Atlantis Pool seems to dive the pool.
They're the only ones.
Right.
They are the only ones. Yeah, and we don't, we're not equipped to take off those covers unless I have that specific nice piece of equipment, the
Right.
$25 rod piece, because I don't care how strong you are, you can't get those covers back on. Same thing with lawn irrigation. Lawn irrigation we can't test in the wintertime either.
I want to thank both Hank and Greg. Great job, fantastic job. No other questions? Anybody have any additional questions? Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having good questions.
Yeah, that's good.
I would ask everybody got the evaluation form in front of you, please fill it out. Any feedback is very useful for the education boards. And we look forward to putting your presentations on the website. Still, if anyone wants to. Still.